Hello and welcome to the Lewis and Kyle Show, an interview podcast where Lewis and I bring on people that we think have the answers to the questions that we're asking ourselves. Whether that be how to make money online, entrepreneurship, marketing, real estate, running a show, or just living an unconventional life. We bring them on to learn what they've done, how they've done it, and we want to share that advice with you all. Lewis, who do we have on the show today?
Hey Kyle, this is a super fun episode. We bring on Howard Lindzon, who's a very accomplished guy. He's done a ton of things, and it's really hard to boil him down to a short intro, but I'll do my best here real quick. He's the founder and general partner of the angel investing firm Social Leverage, which has made early stage investments in companies like Robinhood, Techstars, AngelList, and Wag, the dog walking app. He's also the co-founder and chairman of StockTwits, which is a huge online community for people talking about stocks, different tips for trading, different bets they're making, and that whole scenario. He's also been an active blogger on his website, howardlindzon.com, for about 15 years, where he's used it as a personal investment journal, talking about his decision-making, the trends he's following, and what he's been thinking over the past 15 years. And that is a very interesting thing to go back and read. He's written books on the topics as well. In this episode, we get into his investment philosophy for both private and public investing, his story of how Robinhood was pitched to him and why he chose to invest in them. He shares some career advice for college graduates. And last, we get into how to identify and follow trends. It's a great conversation. I was really grateful he came on to do this with us, and I think you all will really enjoy it. So with that, we're going to cut right to it. Hello, Howard. Thank you so much for coming on the show with us. We really appreciate it. Our first question for you, before we jump into your investing career, both in the public markets and as a private investor, is about your podcast that you've been putting out since the quarantine, Panic with Friends. Since March 10th, you've put out over 75 episodes, which is just a ton of conversations. And a lot of these guests have had major roles in the world in this time. I saw you put out one with Balaji, who was a huge source of information early on, and Cloudflare, which has been a huge piece of the infrastructure, allowing the server load on the internet to just quadruple overnight and not break. What lessons have you learned from this intense period of focused conversation with these people?
It's a good question. I kind of know these people. Matthew, I know personally, from lunches to having Jeremy, my nephew, work there in Austin. I think you may know Jeremy, actually, Bernick. He's cousins of Ruben and Aaron.
Sure.
The major thing you learn is that, it's just how everybody thinks about the world so differently. But, Matthew's got a fast growing company, like you said, internet infrastructure, how they've had to grow during this pandemic, they're working from home just like everybody else. And they had also hired 1,200 people during this whole thing. So everybody's like, the world was shut down, but the world was still growing. And while there was a lot of pain and suffering and all this, to keep the internet growing, they had a job to do, which was onboard, employees and grow their business. And then with Balaji, I was just interested to get his take on what the future looks like with green, red zones and contact tracing. And he studied it so much and really has a little background in biotechnology and genomics. So it's just interesting to just lean back and listen. I don't know Balaji as our first conversation, so it was more listening. Whereas with Matthew, we've hung out and I can goof off a little bit and play off the conversation. So each conversation is different. It's called Panic with Friends. So really I wanted to be with friends that I know. So it's not like just some, hey, welcome to KYZ radio and tell us about your book tour. So I think people like it because it's not radio. It's just conversations with people that I respect and want to learn from.
That's great. I think it's a really cool concept. And Kyle and I also started this podcast during the quarantine with similar goals, not the Panic with Friends idea, but the kind of learning from people who we might not have access to because normally, but we do because of Zoom and they're working from home and those things.
Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't have had time. Listen, I travel 2 weeks a month and this is the first, 120 days I haven't been on a plane. I think I don't remember that. And I'm getting used to it already. So it's like, I'm the experiment myself in that, I'm 50 years old, 54, so I shouldn't lie, but 54 years old and lived a certain life for 30 years, building my business, self-motivating, getting on airplanes, meeting people. And now I'm the rat in the lab, meaning I've been lucky not to get sick or be weirdly affected or poorly or badly affected by this. So I've been one of the lucky ones. and not just in terms of the virus, but financially. And I also have been one of the lucky ones in the sense my life's better. And so what does that mean? Is that 10% of the people whose lives are better, or is it 90%? Like, who's lying to who? What does this look like after, from my nephews and my daughter's perspective and my son who are in their 20s and may never be able to have dinner with their friends and network like they used to, that I did for 20 years, versus a person like me who's like, man, if I can get away with not traveling, would I? And what would that world look like? And what's my marketing going to be? And, how are people going to pitch me and know me? So, from the 20-year-old who's stressing out because their job is going to be different and they don't know who their boss is, being in a Zoom world, learning your skills is different than being in an office environment, to their 30s where it's like, oh God, my whole career has changed because, I can't network and build my network the way I was used to doing it, versus your 50s, which is like, hey, I'm rich, or I think I'm, what do I do because I never really liked travel, and can I build a life where I live in a cocoon, build this, work-life balance at my house? Do I get a nicer house because I know I'm going to work there? Or do I get am I going to go back to WeWork? And do I really need to travel? So we're all thinking about it in different ways. And I think that's part of the podcast too, as life goes on, but life has changed.
Definitely.
Even if it was fake news, even if it was like not the Chinese, it was just a rare strain of virus that the military cooked up to test everybody and see whatever it is, you can blame whoever, but 90 days of lockdown, let's see what happens.
Exactly. And I think that's a really interesting point about, it doesn't really matter who or what caused this, but the effects are here to stay, or they're here to,
they're going to cause a ripple effect. Going to be us pointing fingers. We're a long way from pointing. We're pointing fingers for whatever reason. It makes no sense at this point. Like, the government's supposed to be just figuring this out for us, and the media, but we're too busy to be pointing fingers. What does that do? Like, we're not doing a great job of testing people. Like,
I think we certainly don't trust like what everybody's saying.
You guys would know more than me. I mean, I don't think you guys are going to trust the media. I watch my kids, and they're on TikTok. They're not even stressing out about it. They're just, where do you guys get your news from?
I'll have you go first.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. Most of my news comes directly from Twitter, directly from the people that I follow. I think that it's a really good way to see both sides of the coin, no matter what you're looking for, whether it be stocks or news or whatever, politics. You can just see real time everything. I know that you think that it's like the new Bloomberg. I heard you say that last night, and I totally agree.
But I'm in an echo chamber just because I'm old, and so that's nice that you're trying to listen to both sides. I think for a young person, I wonder if the echo chamber starts young, that's pretty poisonous. So
that's actually one of my tweets the other day, was that it's one of the biggest threats to our generation, is the echo chambers within social media, because both sides directly refuse to look at arguments without thoughtful consideration, and that'll lead to a proliferation of these echo chambers even further, and people just don't see eye to eye at all on anything.
And are you guys doing the same thing? Are you fighting with your friends immediately, or is politics become something that you guys consider? Or, I mean, you guys can vote, so I mean, are you guys having the same arguments?
I think it all depends on who you hang out with. So if you're with like-minded friends, you tend to kind of like all rah-rah and get kind of hype each other up on the same topics. You're like, you agree and they agree with you, and you're getting all excited about it. And then if the friends that you hang out with that view politics differently, it tends to just, that they view politics differently because you can see on their social media that they share things that you don't believe in. And then when you're in person, you just usually choose not to talk about things to keep the contentious arguments to stay friends, for more or less. That's kind of on the extremes. And that's also because the only people that tend to care about politics, or at least vocalize their opinions on politics, tend to have stronger viewpoints, left or right. And so it's known well that it's just best not to bring things up.
Are young people on social media are sharing their politics? I
think it depends on the platform and on the person.
I think it's interesting for you because you've been talking on the internet for the last 15 years. In 2005, your first 5 blog posts, some of the most profitable and influential businesses of the last 15 years. Like you were identifying trends, and then they ended up being right. So I know that's a big piece of your investing strategy, but how do you go about finding the sharks to follow?
I think that's the most I'm lucky I have, I don't do such a good job with it's hard to mentor your own kids. So when I see kids your age, it's like the greatest thrill of my life, because you guys, especially the ones that are opting in to just listen to me, right? It's hard with your own kids. You boss your kids around. Your parents probably hate the same thing. It's like, fuck, am I in charge of my kids at the age of 20? Like, because you're never going to give your own kids good advice once they're 20, because you don't really know that much about them. My son loves music and golf, but don't you want your kid to be, an entrepreneur or take over the world, or, whereas my daughter wants to take over the world. So it's easy to give her advice. And so for my own kids, from all the parents that I talk to that have kids my age, it's like, hey, you've set them on a course. Good luck. Good luck trying to change their opinions. Just be a good parent and set a good example. With other kids that ask me for advice, I'm happy to give them advice. And I seem to be pretty good at giving general advice because I like young people. And if I didn't have to raise them, I don't have to dig into what their flaws and what they excel at, because they're gonna ask me sincere questions about what they should do with their lives. So I'll give them a sincere answer from my view of the world. And for me, it's been quite simple. Is all the mistakes I made were twofold. I'm a good salesman. So all my mistakes were getting involved with businesses and companies and products that weren't good products, right? Like if you're a good salesperson, go work for a company that's already doing a great job selling. And that doesn't mean you can't excel at sales. Like if the product's flying off the shelves, all the better to be a good salesman, because you're going to learn good techniques, because the product's flying off the shelf so fast, you can't afford not to ship it. So you got to figure out how to get the product, and you got to learn all the good things about what happens at a company that's excelling. So the lesson number one that I tell young people, and it's not even about finding trends, it's just stating the obvious, is what companies are you guys talking about? What companies would you kill to be inside of? And then go figure out how to get inside that company. If that means starting a podcast and getting recognized in the marketing department, or if that means going into the HR department and saying, I'm just going to travel around to campuses for you guys and find other talent, get the best of, or I just want to work on your social media, or I want to be in sales and I don't care how many calls I have to make a day for you. So it's like, get inside a rocket ship. And then once you've experienced a rocket ship, you yourself have spotted the trend, and you will learn a lot more inside a good company than a bad company. It doesn't mean you shouldn't make mistakes. Like, you're going to make mistakes and you'll learn a lot from your mistakes. But if you're going to get skills that apply to real life, do it inside a rocket ship. Do it inside of a place that's going in the right direction. Get yourself pointed in the right direction, which is up and to the right. And, there's so many kids, in my age, you opened up the newspaper to find a job. You didn't have any Google. You couldn't, like, the odds of us doing it right were zero. The thing about kids, our parents today are like pushing kids, get going. And it's like, no, a kid should be figuring out how to launch themselves into orbit. And the easiest way to launch yourself into orbit is don't waste 5 years working at shitty companies. Go make 10 grand working at a great company versus 60 grand working at a company where you're pushing it up the hill by yourself. So in an era where, like, again, when I was 20, it was like, open up the paper, circle a couple things, cold call. You didn't know what the company was, good or bad. Now you can Google and work reverse, build your resume, get spotted on LinkedIn, hopefully, or, you're going to get spotted. There's a chance that you get spotted, obviously, by doing podcasts and putting yourself out there. But there's an easy way for you to just circle the 10 best, go to Glassdoor and look at the 10 best companies to work for, or 100 best companies, and target them. We didn't have those tools. So younger people should just take their time, because you're going to live till you're 100, right? You're in the backseat of an Uber. You're not driving and drinking. You're wearing a mask. You can wear gloves. You can do all these things. You don't have to fly. You can do social media to project yourself. So it's a pretty safe environment to live till you're 100 right now. So why rush when you're 20 to get the first job out of college just so you can get a paycheck, right? So that's the first thing I tell kids that aren't my own. It's harder to tell your own kids that. And then the second thing about trends is, you guys already know it. Follow me. Like, okay, I didn't have anybody to follow. Like, you already know how to do it because you're following me, and that's my job, is to find trends. So as long as I'm finding trends, I'm doing all the work for you. So once you find people that can mentor you and help you spot trends, just be nice to them. You don't need to, like, hold your breath. And if the person that you respect says something that you don't believe with, unfortunately, you're just going to have to brush it off until you yourself are a great white shark. So just keep your mouth shut and follow along. Say thank you once in a while. It's just basic social etiquette. And glean, follow, just like the pilot fish, right? Like if you look at a picture of a great white shark, great life. I mean, it's great. I mean, I don't know, teeth fall out to get new teeth. They're hard to hunt. There's nobody in the ocean that really can take it on. But the pilot fish that swim underneath have a really good life too. And they don't have to kill anything. They don't have to hide from anybody. And all they got to do is swim along underneath the great white shark. So in my world, that's what I do. I found the people that kind of discover things faster than me, so I don't have to do that heavy work. And then I have to position myself not to be too far behind the great white sharks and not to get too far ahead of them. And there's plenty of meat, plenty of food, plenty of directional bias if you swim very close to the leaders in your industry. And so for me, I just follow smart people. And then the people that follow me, it's their decision if they want to catapult forward. So the other thing is, if you ever watch the Tour de France, the bicycle race, very much like the real world, it's in packs, because you can go, the peloton, and you see birds flying like this too. It's, the triangle formation or the cluster formation. And the people in front take on all the wind, and the people behind, up to 40% less drag. And so those people, 2-3 rows back, those people 2-3 rows back are pedaling 40% less. And then at some point they got to move ahead. They springboard ahead to break the wind. So as young kids, you have to decide, of course, sometimes you can't keep up with the pack, because even at 40% less drag, you can't keep up, and you got to fall back and do something differently and just survive. Or you realize, hey, I can keep up with the pack. I'll do my part and get ahead of the pack. And that's what life is like too. You move off in your directions and become an expert in something, and then you become the leader. So it's just that constant push and pull of the peloton, and then deciding where you fit in nature, in the great white shark example.
I think the idea of the cycle where you're going to the front and coming back and going to the front and coming back is really powerful, and an example for how people
love the race.
Look at the world.
Yeah, people love the race. It's a beautiful race, right? It's like, how do they do that? Well, they do that because they're sharing drag, right? They're in great shape. So you got to be in great shape. So what does that mean? Same in life. You got to be prepared. You got to fucking know your subject. You got to be, maybe you can wear Lulu now, and you don't have to wear a suit. Like, there's all these great things, everybody can dress the same. It's not about your clothing, and it's not about where you went to school. You know what I mean? And now with Zoom, it's like, you don't even have to wear pants. You just got to wear a shirt. You know what I mean? Like, how much easier could it be? Or harder? Like, again, maybe clothes was the way you stood out. So, but at the same time, it is what it is. So in a world like that, how do you ride with the pack? And then when do you decide to accelerate? And when do you decide to conserve energy? And that's really what it is. The bike race is a beautiful thing for that, and nature. And try and keep it as uncomplicated as that. And then in the other thing I tell young people, you don't have to be good at one thing. You don't have to be Tiger Woods. Top 150 50 guys on the tour make good money. So once you choose your field, you've got to, it's after a certain amount of time, you will excel. Like, once you pick the lane and the people in the industry you want to be in, there's just time works magical, things. And, it's just a question of getting in shape and, being prepared for the marathon of it all.
Well, I mentioned your incredible track record. I mentioned the five first blog posts, but what's something that stands out in your mind of you being absolutely sure that something was going to take off and then just being completely wrong?
Oh, completely wrong. Good one. No, I know when I'm absolutely right, and that's only been a couple times in my life. So that's important too. Is this like if you work really hard, most deals you do is like, oh, there's a lot of shit can go wrong, and some things you do, you just like, oh my god, like that was a no-brainer. But one that didn't work, meaning I was actually sure it was going to work and it didn't work at all.
If you have an example of that.
I meant like a trend that you thought was going to blow up and change the world. Like you said social networks would, and it has.
On like long tail keywords and how that would change everything.
Was there something?
This is not an ego thing because I'm not the first. I'm not MIT. I'm not Fred Wilson or Mark Andreessen or Warren Buffett. I'm not the shark. So I am personally. I mean, politically, I guess I didn't think Trump would win, right? Because I don't read enough. I don't understand polls, and I trusted the New York Times. Yeah. So it was like, the night he won, New York Times had Hillary Clinton winning until the last minute.
Yep.
So I would say I was dead wrong about that, right?
Sure.
And you could see the market the next day crash, but recovered. Like everybody was confused because we were all following the New York Times and the Washington Post. So that was like the first time I've been wrong. Okay. The second time, and then I'm wrong in the market all the time, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so because the markets are behavior based and it's hard to time it. So I'm wrong in the market all the time, but I've learned to just not blow up. And that's the stock market, which is very different than investing in private companies. Because when in the stock market, you can change your mind the next day, whoop, add up your losses or gains and move on. In the private market, once you invest in a company, it's either they go out of business and or it's 10 years and you don't really have much say, right? So you've got to get the direction right. So I'd say in that essence, I haven't been one where I've shocked. I was like, this is going to work, and it hasn't. There has been deals that are working great and then not working great. We're investing in a company called WAG, which is a dog walking, like Uber for dog walking. And it was kind of silly, but we did the investment because we love dogs and we thought it was a great idea and a great app. And it was working. We invested at a $4 million valuation, and we didn't really have to do that. We were helping the founders with the little things that we help with, and the company was growing. And then they raised $300 million from SoftBank. And I remember my partners and I looking at each other and like, we're fucked. Like either this is now going to be something huge, or it's going to be a zero because, $300 million, we have no say. Like, I mean, SoftBank came in and it's a wild and loose. Nobody needs $300 million, but this is a couple of years ago when SoftBank was spreading money around like drunk sailors. And, I remember looking at my partners going, this is good or bad. This is not in between. Like they're either going to do something amazing with this 300 million and go public and buy a bunch of companies, or they're going to piss away the 300 million and like, it's an embarrassment. And, it's just, as we've learned from SoftBank, everything they touched in the last few years is kind of a disaster. And so we were part of a grand experiment that we had no control over. So we learned a lot of lessons from it, how to protect ourselves from stupidity that goes on around us. That was the first time we're like an lay up, dog walking service that everybody started to make sense, just raised too much money and imploded. Okay. And the company's still around, but like it's just been like, who needs 300? You got to clean up that mess. But in terms of like me investing in something and then just being utterly shocked, hasn't happened because I don't take that kind of risk. I always expect things to be shitty because we're the first check into a company and like so many things can go wrong. So WAG would be the only example of something that it should be doing better than it is, and money screwed it up. Robinhood's an example of like when I met the founders and saw the product, I was like, this is $1 billion. There's very few times where I go, this is $1 billion idea, and that was one that I've been right from day one.
Do you mind getting into that story a little bit? Like at what stage the idea was at when they presented it to you and what you saw in them that excited you about it?
Yeah, I mean,
that's a question we had.
Yeah, the from starting StockTwits and seeing our our success and understanding Twitter. From the very early days, I said, you should be able to buy a stock from the tweet. So I'd shown it to Fred Wilson. I said, why can't, that you click the hashtag and it goes to you opens your brokerage account and you just buy Apple. So if, Howard Lindzon says I'm buying Apple, okay.
Yeah, and I like what you have to say. And I'm just like, I'm just going to follow Howard today.
And of course, you could just go open your own brokerage. You say, I'll open up my own brokerage and buy Apple and, thanks. But my idea was more like, why can't it be from the atomic unit of the hashtag? Like, why shouldn't you just click, it opens your brokerage and, and then sends a thank you note to the guy who sent it. Hey, by the way, no pressure, but thanks for the tip. I bought Apple too. Have a good day. Just all that stuff should be happening from the atomic unit of what Twitter was building. You flash forward, and so they didn't want to do that. I started StockTwits, right or wrong, and we came up with the $sign. And so instead of the hashtag, it was like, well, tickers are spoken. GOOG is a language. AAPL is a language, and there's intent in that language. Meaning, if I say I'm going to the corner store to buy a green apple, and I was on StockTwits, I'd be pissed. Like, what the fuck does going to a corner store to buy Apple have to do with the stock? So, I speak in that language, and I'm like, well, clicking on an Apple hashtag meant nothing because you were getting, references to buying apples, or I like apples, or mixed with, oh, I love Apple, the stock. So in order to make Twitter better for me, I came up with the idea and, showed it to Fred, and Fred was like, that's genius. And so for whatever reason, I started my own company on that, going back 12 years. It's hard to remember all the stories, but I was just like, fuck, this is a good idea. Fred thinks it's a good idea. I'm going to start a company. And the whole thing was, someone should be able to trade from the ticker. And, 5 years later, Robinhood pitched me. They had a high frequency trading firm. It was called something else. And they showed me the app that they were going to build. And I said, if you build that, they were like the old movie, if you build it, people will come. And it was very much Uber for trading. And, it was one of those, whether they believed it or not, I thought, if you build that, StockTwits will get you 10,000 users, and that, so it's very hard to get 10,000 users. And I just absolutely knew that if they built that and let my audience at StockTwits trade on it, everybody on StockTwits would use it. And so I got that right. And once you get the first 10,000, the first 10,000 is what matters. So it's like, that's all I can prove. If I'm writing in a seed check, I'm not smart enough to know if 1 million people will use something, but I was absolutely sure in my mind that 10,000 people would use it. And so if 10,000 people use it, 1 million people can use it because it's the internet. And if you can find 10,000 doppelgangers, you can find 1 million doppelgangers. So when I know that my 10,000 users will use it, it either has to be such a narrow product that only 10,000 people use it, and that's what I have gotten wrong. That's something, but that's still not wrong. I mean, you can still build a business around 10,000 users. It may just be a small media business, but if 10,000 users, if you're going to get to 10, you're going to get to 100. If you're going to get to 100, you're going to get to 1 million. Yeah. So then it just becomes a question: can you build a business around it? And Robinhood's just done all those things on their own spectacularly, and they're an $8 billion company on their way to being a public company, I'm sure.
I just Googled it and they have 10 million users now.
Yeah. I
don't even know if they share those numbers. I'm sure if they have 10, I'm sure it's 20 at this point.
I didn't realize that the timeline of that makes so much sense now, how you already had StockTwits for a period of time.
StockTwits was my inside information.
Yeah. You had aggregated users and knew a lot about the Uber financial nerds or whatever you want to call them, these people that just their entire day is talking about stocks and investments. Secret
sauce information.
Okay. So that makes it so much sense now. So you already had that personal information about the trend of this group of people cares about finance in this way and would love to interact with it in the way that
is one where I got ahead of the sharks. Meaning, I don't care what the sharks are doing. It's not their fault, but I see something. I see a piece of easy kill that I'm going to leave the herd and break away from the pack, even if that means they're going right and I'll get lost. There are certain points in your life where you just see the pitch and you go, wait a minute, I'm an expert at this. It's not their fault that they don't see it. I don't even want to bug them. And it's not like I went to all my sharks and said, hey guys, what about this? Those sharks give me money. So Fred Wilson and Mark Andreessen, they're investors in my fund. They're betting on me to swim away from the pack once in a while. I only leave the pack when I see something that is completely in my experience. Like I know I'm in good enough shape to do it.
Sure.
I know the team around me to do it. I have signal from things that I know. They'd yell at me if I didn't leave the pack to do that. Like that's my job. And, and that's what leads to outsized success is, swimming away from the safety once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't swim away from the safety just to swim away from the safety. Right? And that's just nature. Mm-hmm. Follow Mother Nature on this stuff. It's like, you got to do things sometimes by the book, but occasionally you got to leave.
I mean, if you see something, exploit it. So.
Yeah. But there's risk involved, like always, but I had reduced the risk immensely. And that doesn't mean they should have believed me. I mean, they took my money, but they could have said, we'll do it another way. But they also got something out of it. Like what a great hack to get 10,000 users, to get someone for free promoting it all the time. So it was a win-win-win. And I haven't had to do much work with the company since then because it's a rocket ship. Because the first 10,000 people were really just a lab for what millions of people were going to do.
Definitely. So on the same topic of your investment group, it's called Social Leverage is the firm. Could you explain the meaning of that? Because I know it's relating to kind of leveraging the power of the compounding effects of relationships and having different, relationships primarily, different social relationships, different relationships with people in different companies, and being able to use that collective knowledge and the network effects to grow everyone win-win-win. Is that the meaning of it, or is there a different, and is that actually, does the investment philosophy kind of turn out the way you had designed it to with that idea in mind?
Yeah, it's just turned out better. I thought the banks were ripping us off. I thought they were criminal organizations, and that was in my head, so that was what woke me up in the morning. It's like, fuck, I hate the banks. I think they got away with murder in 2008, and it should have been perp walks for the CEOs of the banks, and they knew what was going on, yada, it drove me nuts until I just stopped stressing about it. But, and what brought down 2008, whether you were in real estate or whatever, was financial leverage, meaning, the concept of, well, if I got $1,000, I can lend it out 10 times and yada, you learn it in school, right? But it doesn't take very much to blow things up. And so I never bought into I'm Canadian, I'm conservative, I never bought into the infinite leverage of money. And it may be there, but it leads to irresponsible behavior, and it doesn't take much of a move for the market to blow up. And we see this in the stock market all the time. But so until 2008 in the real estate crisis, financial leverage was cool. As a way to, like, instead of buying one home, I'll buy 10 using little bits of money, and constantly increasing my risk because I have all these interest payments, and if something small happens in the system, you get blown up. Whereas social leverage was something where, like, if I'm nice and I'm smart about one subject on the web, people will find me, and then I'll have people that find me, and it's like, it's infinite. And the only risk is you blow yourself up because you overcommit your time, right? You get lost in the leverage of it all, and you're just farting around all day, wasting your time. But it's infinite leverage, social, because, and it's good leverage because you get to meet down to, the long tail is you meet thousands of people from one point on the internet. It's infinite. So I had this whole concept about, social leverage is good. And the only thing I got to worry about is cleaning my stream, right? Making sure there's no cancer in the system. People sneak into your life through your social network because you may not have taken the time to curate it properly, and they turn out to be a bad egg or a bad node in the system. So the only thing that, and that's, you can look at the social networks themselves, Facebook and Twitter, and they're only bad because of choices they make themselves, right? There's always going to be bad actors, but it's how you keep them out, or how you clean up the river. The Nile River used to be a clean river, and now if you drink out of the Nile River, you can go blind. So as great as that river was, it's not so great anymore if you pollute it forever. So the idea of social leverage is much like a river, and as much like, it's infinite and it's flowing all the time, and it's up to us to kind of curate it and clean it and protect it And so we all have this infinite amount of leverage, and if you take care of it, you can grow. And so that's why these platforms are doing so well, right? It's so easy to maintain them relative to the old world, right? It's very digital. It's not as much physical, and there's a lot less chances for it to get polluted, and it's much easier to keep these platforms updated and so if they're working, they're growing. And so that's the concept of social leverage.
And the downside risk is just much more controllable than the downside of financial leverage.
Oh yeah, financial leverage is a tactic, not a strategy. Eventually, it comes back to haunt you, as we've seen in 2008. We can't predict when. We don't predict what the pinprick that does it.
Housing prices going down.
Social leverage, you can wreck it, but there's millions of ways to clean up the nodes in the system, whether it's Cloudflare. There's everybody's building tools to keep. Going back to the river before there was the cloud, there was millions of ways to clean the river, but if everybody takes a shit in the river, eventually it's going to get polluted. Twitter, we're seeing that everybody's taking a dump, and Twitter's not, their terms of use are so you really have to clean your own river, and which I do. Like, that's part of my job. I'm like, I can't complain about it. I got to just constantly curate, which leads to echo chambers, unfortunately. So the downside of Twitter and Facebook not doing their job, and probably why people are so excited about decentralized, whether it works or not, is that, these gatekeepers are doing a shit job of curating. They're creating algos to throw shit at me that I don't want, and therefore we're in danger. We're seeing the downside of social leverage in a centralized world where there's a gatekeeper that decides what you can see and what you can't see. So really, they're media companies, and they're denying being media companies, and they're letting lie. If they're a media company, they should be subject to it, like burying us in lies. So they're playing it both ways. So we're seeing right now why it's TikTok and Snapchat are probably the best social networks. And why I'm long Snapchat, and why I would be, why I'm long Tencent, which is kind of like TikTok in many ways, is they're not really social networks. They are communication platforms and media businesses, and they're kicking off bad actors and trying to protect their users by either the messages disappearing, or with TikTok, it's really just multiple channel TV channel. You get to choose your path. So social leverage has its downsides, and we're seeing that with Facebook and Twitter. Maybe not so much with Instagram, but we're seeing new forms of the leverage, which is TikTok, which is fascinating, and Snapchat, which is opening up their API to create mini apps, much like Tencent, which is an interesting idea.
Sure. So the big difference between yourself as social leverage and these media companies, Twitter and Facebook, is that
they're media companies. You just said they'll say they're free speech platforms, and I'm like, good luck.
The difference is that you're the gatekeeper for social leverage, the firm, whereas these companies aren't doing as good of job as gatekeeping as you'd like to think. But Kyle has.
I hate judging them, because StockTwits is a little bit of both, right? We argue all the time at StockTwits, if Donald Trump was on StockTwits, would we kick him off? And it's like, no brainer. As I'm not the CEO, but it's no brainer to me. Gone. Like, no one's bigger than the system. If you take a shit on people in StockTwits, we're kicking you off. Sure. You can come back and behave under a different name. It's pseudonymous. You can start again, but you blew your chance. Zero tolerance.
So
Twitter has endless tolerance, right? They're changing the rules for somebody. That's the beginning of the end. Once you start changing your rules to please one person, well, you got to have rules for everybody.
Yep.
Instead of having simple rules, 10 commandments, like whether they're good or bad, there's 10 commandments. Maybe there should be 40, but we're living with 10. And it seems to have worked pretty damn well.
I think we're certainly seeing the beginning of the end for at least one of these four major platforms that have controlled the last 8 or 9 years.
Correct. I won't predict how it's going to end, but we are definitely, and you can see it in the stock price, right? Snapchat is starting to, people are like, "Oh, it's 20 billion. Why is it going up?" Well, because they're not a social network. They're a communications platform, and the users trust it, because the messages are going to disappear, yada, yada, yada. And then we're starting to see also that it used to be a college product, but now we know that 13-year-olds use it, and now we know that postgraduates are using it. So they're kind of slowly breaking out of, much like Facebook started out as a single school and then spread to the world. Snapchat is now trying to figure out, okay, we had our cohorts, but now we're finding out that kids that leave college will still use Snapchat. Well, that's a big, big thing. And now Snapchat's trying to figure out how do they make their product more usable for people that have left college and have their 200 friends and communicate and still use it. Twitter has none of that power, right? You really have to come onto Twitter and invest and really figure it out for yourself. That's a lot of work that most people aren't willing to do.
So you get pitched, it's changing gears now. You get pitched all the time, probably every day in some form or fashion, with a good business being a prerequisite. So the company's good, you think it'll probably work. What sets the pitch or the founder apart from one another?
It just depends. I'm very much put walls up around me. Like, I'm not doing biotech. I'm not doing certain things. So someone pitching me, they should be pitching me around a financial services or something. They should know what I'm looking for first, because I'm out there putting the vibe out, right? And I'm out there writing and doing that. So yes, I do get pitched all the time because people don't know that there's certain rules of engagement, and it's not their fault. But it's definitely a screening tool that I use. Just cold pitches. I can't. Maybe they get lucky and I skim it, and it's a miracle that I'm like it. But most of the time, it's warm pitches from people in my network that I've done business with, and they know what I do, or the founder knows, it's in my sweet spot. But generally, it's a founder. I'm 54, like I said, so I'm older. I'm not proving anything, so I'm looking for things that excite me. I want to be the number one user of investments that I make. I trust my own instincts around that. So if the product is something I'm not going to use, it's, what do I have to prove? And, even if the founder is great, I'm like, if I can't be your biggest cheerleader, I don't know why you would want me as an investor. So I want to be like head of marketing, head of sales for the company without getting paid. So I have to find products and companies that I believe in, because just making money is not a factor for me anymore. When you're 20, it's the urge that I would tell 20-year-olds to resist. It's like, don't leave the flock until you see a sure thing, right? But it's easy to get, in a world where everything's abundant, where you have all this time and you have all this content and you have all these relationships, it's easy to get off course every day. So that's the risk that younger people face, is like knowing when to leave the flock or the peloton. For me, it's like, every time I do that, I fucking get mad. Like, if it's about something, a shiny object that I don't have complete passion about. And so that's what I guard against. So it's generally the person. It's generally an industry that I already love. And it's generally something where we can help accelerate it. Because if you're going to do it, you might as well do it right. And so, there's just, you're trying to just, it's like a football game. You got to break through the hole. And once you break through the hole, there's like, okay, like a thoroughbred can get to the end zone, but it's that whole angle of attack on the line of scrimmage that we're trying to help people with. So, a great entrepreneur, once they see open space, just goes. But how do you help that entrepreneur get through the line of scrimmage and rise above the noise and get their first 1,000, 5,000, 10,000 users? If we think we can help with that, it's a no-brainer for us.
Sure. That's a really good answer to that question. I like that a lot, especially the sports metaphor of how the most difficult part, or at least your expertise, is getting through that point of most resistance at the line of scrimmage, and then giving them enough escape velocity so that to get them to the the open field. And then at that point,
we're in a power law business. Escape velocity is very important. So if you see a great running back, listen.
You say a power law?
Very much. Power law means that one company pays for 100 companies, right? So you're going to be wrong all the time. Whereas in the stock market, if you put a portfolio together, you can just batch 20 different companies in different industries together and throw a dart at the wall and get market returns. Investing in startups is much different. Most of the time, because you're stuck with the investment for 10 years or however long they stay in business, throwing a dart does not work. Maybe one day it'll work, but right now throwing a dart is less likely to work versus the stock market. And therefore, one company that stands out will make you all your returns. And so they call that power law.
Sure. I don't think it would be really fair to get you on here and not get some opinions or commentary on the overall hard book market, as that's something that, I was looking at your website again yesterday doing research. You put out like 50 tweets a day on Twitter, 50 on StockTwist. You're making comments. I've been on your newsletter ever since we started talking to you about putting this podcast together. So the first question I have for you is about the article you actually put out yesterday about Vanguard versus Robinhood. And I think this is a really interesting trend that you brought up about how Robinhood is kind of debundling the stock market, whereas Vanguard, 500 stocks, that's over diversified. And that's something you could potentially comment on as well, because I wasn't sure. Like you kind of said that's as a truth. And I was wondering if you could provide some explanation as to why you think 500 stocks is over diversified, and then also explain a little more how Robinhood's unbundling Vanguard and what do you think that means and why that's a good thing or not.
Yeah, I think even Warren Buffett has said, if you don't have tons of money, you have an edge over him, right? Like, and so even Warren, this is what drives me nuts about the media. Like, they're not even like Warren Buffett believes he can be beaten, and even Jack Bogle, who started Vanguard, thinks that everybody doing the same thing is dumb, which is where we're at right now in the markets. And just because it's dumb doesn't mean it won't work. Like I think most people will outperform if they put their money in, consistently in an index fund. Mm-hmm. So I'm not like against it. I just don't think it's smart in the sense that you're not learning anything, and you're not you're just throwing your hat into the ring and saying, oh, we'll all fall off the cliff together, or we'll all make this. I just don't like that idea, right? Especially around something as precious and as fragile as the stock market, which is very much, so unique to America. So that gets me riled up. So Vanguard was great because it was reducing costs for people. So I get that. Like that just makes common sense. And some people, need to save. And when banks aren't paying 5% or 7% interest, you've got to, want to return, get a return on your capital in companies, where the pie is increasing. It's great to invest in companies. Then we went through this Vanguard phase for the last 30, 40 years, where because it makes sense for most people and because 401ks are set up the way they are, everybody started doing the same thing. And it just became a thing. Like, you're an idiot. You're not indexing. And Vanguard just became like vanilla and BlackRock. And along comes, and so I'm swimming against this tide with Twitter and stock twits. And, then Uber comes along and allows people to, just decide on the moment to get a car, and you have YouTube and you can pick your own game and go down whatever rabbit hole you want. And with stocks, it's, to me, we just hit this point where it was inevitable, and along comes Robinhood that said, we're going to just unbundle this thing and I'll let people just pick and choose the stocks they want. At the same time, obviously social networks had come along, and obviously people are picking their own path there. Right. There's the Vanguard Twitter, which is just push the home screen and see what they serve up. And then there's the timeline way of Twitter, which is like, I don't give a fuck. And I want to get a rando tweet when I open up some hysterical, out of context, non-presidential political statement from some friend that I follow that is completely out of context. It may make me laugh or, And so the stock market's the same way. I mean, shouldn't I be able to build the portfolio that I want when I choose? And so we've hit this phase and we're seeing it because of COVID, maybe because sports is closed. Cares what the reasons are in the end. People are choosing to open a Robinhood account and either learn, blow their brains out, try and become a millionaire overnight, whatever. And the media is having a field day with this, to the benefit of Robinhood, by saying this is dumb. Well, I would argue it's not dumb. It was just going to happen. And Robinhood just, in the time and everything, they executed right, where they just decided, they put a finger in the dike and said, listen, they're not saying 500 stocks is stupid. I'm saying 500 stocks is stupid. It's not Robinhood saying Vanguard's wrong. I think Vanguard has its point and Robinhood has its point. You can walk into a Walmart and buy a gun. It's stupid to me. But we're letting kids do that. We're letting kids drive drunk. We're letting kids, vape. But they can't buy one share of Amazon and YOLO it. So I'm more of the, to me, Robinhood is free speech more than Twitter is free speech. Robinhood's saying, I hate Philip Morris, or I hate food companies, or I hate this conglomerate, and I want to remove them from my portfolio. So when I buy the S&P 500, I got Comcast in there, I got Verizon, I got AT&T, I got railroads, I got oil companies. I'm like, I don't know, that seems very no free speech. And Robinhood is like, okay, I like Peloton and Lulu. well, shouldn't you have 10 companies? Well, that's my choice. Like, leave me alone. That's how I'm voting, with my money. And so that's the freest speech possible, is your hard-earned money, or your parents' money, or wherever you got your money. And so we are now in an area where people don't talk about, but it's a free speech thing. We're finally letting people vote with their wallets again, for free. And for free, but I mean, it's never anything for free. But the choice is magical. And I think kids have gotten a flavor of it. And it's like, you're not going to put that back in the box again, because you have a social network. Hey, Howard, what do you like? All right, well, if my story makes sense, I'm not an analyst getting paid. And, you're not, if you like my Snapchat story, you get to ride along with it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, by the way, if you're nice to me, you can probably ask me a question in 2 weeks about Snapchat. Did I change my mind? But so I'm saying, like, when you have that much democratization of information, and so many different platforms to find smart people to chat with, and then you give them a free tool to invest with, Vanguard's dead, in my opinion. It may take 50 years, and I can't predict when, but in an era where they have hidden the hardest part, which is the fractionalization and the choice, it's just a matter of time. And it won't even, it's just a matter of time.
I agree with you about the fractionalization, and how being able to get exposure to all 500 companies was a major competitive advantage for them, and how that's gone away with Robinhood. But I think another draw to funds like Vanguard is the promise of good returns with passivity. Because for me, I know if I
good returns though. See, I argue that
sure, that's obviously there's no agreed upon assumption.
That's just something the media is bought into. It's a narrative that he did this.
Sure.
And the unbundling means also, it's like, wait a minute, I'm very focused on, I'm going to get rich by getting on a rocket ship.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't need to get the S&P returns. Maybe I should be 90% cash, 10% stocks, and the 10% stocks should be the two favorite.
Like a barbell approach.
But just whatever. There's no rules. There's these media-defined boundaries that I should be in the S&P 500 and get 10% a year. I'm like, that seems shitty to me. Why shouldn't I be able to make 90%? So again, we're seeing kids say, wait a minute, YOLO, fuck this 10% bullshit, and that's the beauty of it, is, and they'll learn that, oh shit, if I'm trying it for 90%, I could lose all my money. Yeah. Okay. Well, so start small, take your first, you got 10 grand, take 1,000 and YOLO the shit out of it. And you'll learn if you like the water. And you'll figure it out if you lose it quickly, to find, shit, that didn't feel good. Let me find some people that know what they're doing. And so I just don't like this idea of, here's what you should expect from your returns, and what you get from that is Walgreens. You walk into Walgreens, you're looking for a fucking chocolate bar, and there's 7,000 chocolate bars. I'm like, do we need 7,000 chocolate bars? I thought I knew what I liked, but I always presented with 7,000 Band-Aids, 7,000 shampoos, 7,000, gums, whatever. And in the end, Amazon unbundled, it was like, I know what I need. I'm just going to fucking type it into the thing and get it. And
praise capitalism.
What's that?
I said, praise capitalism. You walk into
praise capitalism, and this is media. Media's just decided, and media's in its last legs here, because they used to have power and now they don't. And we're in this massively wild shift from Walter Cronkite to the complete opposite now, and we'll probably revert back to the middle. And we were on this thing with the corner store that became Amazon, that became Walmart, and it was unbundled with Amazon. And COVID might have killed the corner store. We were headed back to a corner store until COVID, and so we're in a dangerous period of corporate and media. Their last, corporations are much stronger than media, and but media is on its last power. It used to have respect. Now it's just a laughing stock. And part of the laughing stock is finance. Is don't tell me what the returns are. And kids are just like, I don't give a fuck what the returns are. I'm doing what I like. And that's the Robinhood versus Vanguard. It's a bigger fight than people understand. And it's the biggest fight. It's money,
Yeah,
freedom,
I think
money and freedom. And Vanguard is popular because they lobby. I mean, it might have been a great product, and it may still be the best product, but they lobby them and BlackRock, lobby the shit to get the rules changed in their favor because they're so powerful. And so this has now become like biblical. It's like, okay, well, Vanguard. Well, now we're starting to see is like, I don't like 10% a year. I don't like owning crappy companies as part of my Vanguard 500. I'd like to deselect. All Vanguard has to do is create a deselect button and they could win. There'd be no Vanguard, but they decided not to. They had the power to do all this.
Yeah, I think that
They could have just launched a brand called Vanguard Plus, which is just like, tell us which companies you don't want to be in your, just let me pick 5 companies that I hate. Vanguard, Comcast, AT&T, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo. I'd like those to not be, I'd like to own the Vanguard 495.
Yeah,
if they gave me that choice, there'd be no Robinhood.
I think that M1 Finance is a really interesting tool that gives that passivity that Lewis is talking about and also gives you the ability to choose what you want.
Yeah.
I think also that you're right about the media being not only a laughing stock, but just like not almost only listened to point out the parts of it that are bullshit.
Well, they're not trying, right? When they're either trying too hard or not trying. There's no success just doing your job at a media company. You got to either get clicks or you have to just write vanilla headlines.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's nobody working really hard because you don't get paid to work really hard. So the good ones try and go it on their own and stick to a niche, whether it's sports or technology or politics, and you have to go find them on Substack, or you have to go find them, and then you got to go support your journalists to go do that, and that's up to us, and it's going to happen. Like in the end, it's just going to happen. We're just going to, you do good work, I'll support you. The Patreon approach, and you're going to have to find your 1,000 true fans and go build a business.
Mm-hmm.
And journalists have to swim away from the great white shark right now, which is Fox and CNN and MSNBC. Like, if you're going to be good, you may have built your platform there, but if you want to be relevant in the future, you got to swim away from the great white shark, and not enough are, right? And because they're scared and whatever, but the good ones are, and they'll get discovered in this new world. So media is the furthest behind in the reality of this new world.
On a different note, just a direct question. What tech stocks do you think are the safest over the next 10 years in terms of not being disrupted?
Well, there's no safe. In terms of not being disrupted, we've seen, COVID made, which is pretty catastrophic economic event, made the FANG stocks stronger. So I think it'd be hard to argue that they're not safe, but I don't like the word safe. It's hard to argue that in 10 years they won't be bigger. So you have to play that game. Any portfolio should begin with some combination of 2 to the 5 of those companies. You can have a personal opinion, but as long as you pick 2 of the 5 right, you're diversified. And then the real thing about it, beating the markets then or trouncing the markets, which I like to say, is how do you pick the next 10 or 15 companies that are in your portfolio, the ones that could become planets? I call the FANG stocks planets, and I'm trying to find, companies that are going to launch themselves into orbit and be, the up and coming FANG stocks. And is that Twilio? Is that Elastic? Is that Peloton? Is that Lulu? Is that, now there's probably 100 companies to choose from, and you got to find 10 that, that complement your 2 or 3 planet picks. Mm-hmm. And everything else is noise. You want to own Caterpillar or 3M or an airline. I don't get it. You can play those games and try and, win around the edges, but really it comes down to picking the next companies that Apple and Facebook and Netflix and Amazon and Google are going to have, and Microsoft are going to have to buy. Like, can you predict which companies are coming up that to protect the planets they're just going to eat up? And that's what I try and do. So I look at the stocks as like a video game. It's like, who can get to the next level? Which companies are going to get to the next level? I don't go much deeper than that. I'm playing a very high-end Lego tactical market cap business. Can Peloton get to the next level? I think so. I think they're, and so it's about that.
So I have one bonus question. It's maybe a quick one. I looked on your Twitter and saw some of the accounts I was following that followed you. And I saw that the state of Israel followed you on Twitter, which I thought was really interesting. I'm not sure if you knew that.
I didn't know. I'm nervous.
Oh, I was wondering if you knew that and if could explain why. Okay.
No, I mean, I was in Israel in the West Bank last year. I had a great trip. Maybe someone knew someone there that I'll have to look that one up. That's cool.
Yeah.
No, I don't know why. I don't look. So one thing is I don't know who follows. Otherwise, I would change the way I tweet. So or speak. I try and I'm not truth to power or anything. I'm just truth to goofing off. So Twitter is a place where I test things. Like a comedian will go on stage in a without telling people and try material. Twitter is where I try things. I'm trying not to offend, but I'm also trying to see what people are interested in and put the vibe out there. So Twitter is just my blank space where I can just get a reaction. If you could walk into a movie theater while everybody's looking at the screen in a dark room and yell something and then hear their reaction and sneak out, that would be pretty cool, right? That would be like a great place to try different things. If you want to scream a dirty epitaph, or if you want to do a limerick, or if you want to scream a joke, or if you want to see, and Twitter is the exact same thing, right? Like, where else could I go and just do 5,000-10,000 people just yell something and get a response?
Definitely.
I choose to try and do something that is educational and makes people think. Other people are trying to do more manipulative things, but it's a great place to yell things or blurt things out. And with respect to state Israel, I mean, that's great. The more people, I would get nervous knowing who follows me. I just want to be Howard. I just want to be Howard. So I don't really look at my metrics, or I don't look at that stuff, because you can't grow. And it's the same thing with money. You can't grow. And that's why I don't like gambling in Vegas. I don't like counting. I know when I'm in Vegas, I count my chips. And if you're counting your chips, you're never going to get rich. And if you're looking at your bank account every minute, you're not going to get rich. And if you're worried about what your Twitter people your fans are going to say, then you're not going to grow your fan base. And so those are just simple truths. They just are just truths of nature. And so you kind of stay true to like keep your it's like, famous people put what do you call it around them, like all this group around them, the groupies, the posse. I don't want a posse, right? Like the posse kind of changes your easy to get a posse, you pay for it, and it just screws your whole fucking rhythm up. Yeah. So no, state Israel, no.
All right. I have one more question here. This is kind of a broad theme that connects a lot of the different successes you've had personally and with your investing. What are the most powerful way you'd recommend for young people to use the internet, whether that's Twitter, blogging, podcasting, to get leverage in terms of relationships, audience, whatever, to grow their career network?
What I tell all the guys, it could be Twitter, it could be TikTok, but just start, journaling and recording, and don't worry about who's following you, because why do you want followers when you don't know who you're going to be yet, right? What your voice is. So, I think owning your own domain is great. So, whether it's WordPress, like do it yourself, like own, it's easier to just go to Tumblr or Substack or Patreon, but you then don't own or Medium or Twitter. I mean, Twitter's okay because at least SEO, that'll pop up there. But I like WordPress because it's my domain, even though no one can take it from me. And if I decide to move WordPress somewhere else, I got all the data.
But you own your list.
Yeah. I own my list. And Substack, there's companies now saying when you come on, even if you don't own your domain, you own that list. That's your life's work. So I'm very serious about like, just get started and don't tell people you're doing it, because what's the point? And then you'll find your voice, and then, people will find you.
That's what you told us in our first call. You said, don't worry about growing your show. If it's good content, it'll get found.
Yeah. And then if it doesn't get found, and you think you love doing it, then you'll hire somebody to help it get found.
Absolutely. One thing I wanted to tell you before you hop off was I found a thing for my sleep that is the military position.
Military position.
You lay with your I'll just use left right. You use your left leg at a 90-degree angle and your left arm up like this. And then your right side is down, like your right arm is down and your left leg is straight.
You send me a link. You send me a picture. For a picture. Yeah.
I will. Yeah.
I appreciate that. Yeah. I'm ready to go to the dispensaries at this point to get weed. I'll try anything if it's meant for sleep. If it's meant to get me calm, and if it's meant to, part of it is routine, right? Turn your screen off. I'm pretty good about that. But if you've done all the things that you're supposed to do and still can't get to sleep, I'm all for drugs, not like hard drugs. I'm all for whatever it takes. For me, riding helps me meditate instead of yoga. So it's like, you got to build a life where it allows me to ride, I got to find the hour and a half a day to ride, or 5 days a week. So with sleep, same thing. I try everything because, sleep is important.
Mm-hmm. The thing about this position is that you can't move. It takes a lot of energy for your body to like toss and turn when you're in it. So It's been really helpful for me. It's reduced my time to fall asleep by at least half. So I'll send it to you.
All right. I'm paying it forward. I appreciate it.
Of course.
All right, well, we really appreciate you coming on here.
Very good job. I'm happy I could help. Hopefully I'll spread it around when you send me the link.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
All right, gentlemen.
Thank you so much.
Have a good day.
Have a good weekend.
That wraps up our interview with Howard Lindzon. I'm really excited that we got the opportunity to speak with him, to pick his brain about investing, about life, about his philosophies. I'm really inspired right now, Lewis, and I hope that we are able to have more and more conversations like that one.
Definitely. I loved a lot of the concepts and ideas he had, particularly the idea of rocket ships as a framework for talking about different business opportunities. If you can't build your own rocket ship, spend some time joining another one and work your way in if you have to. Offer to work for free, find a way to bring value to them, and learn and grow with a team like that. And that's really a framework I want to apply to my own life. And there's so many other great ideas he shared with us. I really hope you all enjoyed that conversation as much as Kyle and I did and learned from it the same way we did. We have a ton we need to unpack from it as well to make sure we really got all the value out of it. But if you made it this far, I'm assuming you liked what you heard. Maybe it's just because you really liked Howard. Maybe it's because you like Kyle and I and our questions. Doesn't really matter. But if you want to support the Lewis and Kyle show, which I really hope you do, the best way you can do that is by leaving us a rating and or review on iTunes. That's the best way for our show to grow in popularity, to be recommended to people in the feeds, to be ranked highly in the charts, and is the best way we'll move forward. And that's helping us get high quality guests like Howard on the show in the future and continue having these awesome conversations. So thank you so much for listening. Please leave a rating or review if you enjoyed the show, and we will see you in a couple of days with the next episode. Thank you so much. See you next time.